In the frozen snow-choked hellscape of December 1944, the German war machine, a beast long thought to be dying, had roared back to life with a horrifying final fury. Hitler's last desperate gamble, the massive Ardennes offensive, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge, had ripped a massive bleeding hole in the American lines. Elite Panzer divisions, the Iron Fist of the Third Reich, spearheaded by the most battle-hardened and arrogant veterans of the entire war, were storming through the dense, snow-laden forests. They were arrogant, they were confident, and they were utterly contemptuous of the soft, supposedly decadent Americans they saw fleeing before them. The lightning war, the blitzkrieg was back, and they believed nothing on earth could stop them. For the German tankers of the veteran Führer Begleit Brigade, an elite Panzer unit formed from Hitler's personal bodyguard, the advance was a glorious return to the victorious days of 1940. Their Panther and Panzer IV tanks, technologically superior and crewed by men who had survived the frozen apocalypse of the Eastern Front, were the undisputed kings of the battlefield. They rolled down the narrow icy roads of Belgium, their powerful Maybach engines roaring a symphony of destruction, their commanders standing proudly in their turrets, laughing at the chaos and panic they were creating. They saw the American G's as a disorganized, poorly led mob, a defeated army on the run. They were the hunters, and the entire American 7th Armored Division was their designated prey. As their column approached the key crossroads town of St. Vith, a vital artery for the entire American defense, they expected to roll right over the demoralized defenders and continue their race to the Meuse River. They knew the Americans had some Sherman tanks, a tank they derisively called the Tommy Cooker for its tendency to burst into flames. They knew the Americans had anti-tank guns, but those were predictable conventional threats. You could see them, you could flank them, you could destroy them. The German tankers, veterans of 1,000 brutal engagements, believed they had seen everything the American army could possibly throw at them. They were about to be shocked into a new, terrifying, and utterly incomprehensible reality. Deep in the snow-covered woods that flanked the road to STV, a small, forgotten unit of the U.S. Army was in a desperate, impossible situation. They were artillerymen from the 7th Armored Division. Their weapon was the M7 Priest, a self-propelled howitzer. It was in essence a big, powerful 105 mm cannon mounted on a Sherman tank chassis, but with a crucial fatal floor for direct combat, an open top. It had only thin armor designed to stop shrapnel, not armor-piercing shells. Its profile was high and easily visible. Most importantly, its main gun was a howitzer designed to fire a massive high-explosive shell in a high looping arc over a distance of several miles. It was a superb weapon for its designated job to stay hidden far behind the front lines and obliterate unseen targets. It was absolutely positively not an anti-tank gun. Its shell traveled too slowly to reliably hit a moving tank, and it lacked the penetrating power of a dedicated anti-tank weapon. Using an M7 Priest to fight a Panzer head-on was strictly forbidden by every U.S. Army doctrine. It was a suicidal, insane idea. But the American artillerymen were out of options. The German Panzers were coming. The front line, which was supposed to be miles ahead of them, no longer existed. They were the front line. An American artillery officer, facing the annihilation of his men and the collapse of the entire sector, made a decision born of pure, unadulterated desperation. He would break every rule in the book. He ordered his M7 priest to do the one thing they were never ever designed to do: become ambush predators, become tank hunters. The American crews, with a sense of grim, fatalistic determination, frantically drove their M7 south off the roads and deep into the dense, snow-covered pine forests that lined the route of the German advance. They camouflaged them with cut pine branches and draped them in white sheets until their high profiles blended almost perfectly with the snow-lidden trees. They were no longer an artillery battery waiting for orders from a distant observer. They were now a hidden pack of wolves waiting for the prey to walk into their jaws. The lead elements of the German Panzer column, a reconnaissance platoon of Panzer IV South, rumbled down the narrow tree-lined road toward St. Vith. The German commanders, in their turrets, scanned the woods with their binoculars, their eyes trained to spot the familiar boxy shape of a Sherman or the glint of a bazooka. They saw nothing but a silent, beautiful, snow-lidden forest. They felt completely safe, completely in control, their arrogance swelling with every meter they advanced unopposed. From his hidden camouflage position, an American gunner in his M7, Priest watched the lead German tank enter his sights. He was just a few hundred yards away, a point-blank range for a cannon of this size. He was not aiming in a high arc. He was aiming straight ahead like a sniper aiming a rifle. He waited his heart pounding in his chest, and then his commander gave the order to fire. Instead of the sharp, high-velocity crack of an anti-tank gun the Germans were accustomed to, the forest erupted with a deafening guttural boom. A massive 33 pounds, 105 millimeters high explosive shell, a shell designed to obliterate concrete bunkers and pulverized infantry formations, screamed across the short distance and slammed into the side of the lead panzer. The German crew never knew what hit them. The shell didn't just punch a neat armor-piercing hole. It detonated with such catastrophic concussive force that the entire 4-5-ton tank was engulfed in a massive fireball. The sheer explosive energy ripped the tank's turret from its housing and threw it a dozen feet into the air, where it spun like a macabre top, before crashing upside down in the snow. On the road, the entire German Panzer column ground to a halt. The commanders stared in utter disbelief. This was their first shock. What in God's name was that? The sound was wrong. The explosion was too big for a Sherman. It was too big for any anti-tank gun they knew of. It sounded like an artillery shell, but that was impossible. Artillery was miles away. How could an artillery shell hit them with a flat trajectory, like a rifle shot from a position they couldn't see? Panic and confusion swept through the German ranks. The panzer commanders, convinced it was a fluke, a lucky shot, ordered their tanks to open fire on the woods where the shot had come from. They sprayed the trees with machine gun fire and high explosives, searching for the source of the attack. They saw nothing. Just as they focused all their attention and firepower on one side of the road, a second deafening boom erupted from the other side of the road. Another M7 priest, hidden in a completely different position, had fired. A second German tank exploded in a shower of shrapnel and flame. This was their second and more profound shock. The enemy wasn't just invisible. He was in two places at once. The Germans were completely and utterly baffled. They were being hunted by a ghost. They were trapped on a narrow, icy road, a perfect killing zone, being picked apart by an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy that used a weapon that shouldn't have been there in a way it should never have been used. This was the genius of the American tactic. The M7 priests were using a shoot-and-scoot strategy. They would fire one or two devastating rounds from their perfectly camouflaged position. And then, while the Germans were still reeling in shock and firing wildly into the empty woods, they would use their tracked chassis to quickly reverse, drive a few hundred yards through the dense forest under cover, and set up in a new, completely unexpected ambush position. For the German tankers, it was a waking nightmare. The forest had come alive. Every direction held a new invisible threat. Every earth-shattering boom of the phantom cannon sent a fresh wave of terror through their ranks. Their glorious, arrogant advance had turned into a stationary, frozen slaughter. Tank after tank was hit and brewed up, their veteran crews incinerated inside their steel coffins. The elite tankers of the Führer-Begleit Brigade, men who had faced down the entire Red Army, were now being systematically erased by a handful of American artillerymen who had broken every single rule in the book. Their legendary fighting spirit shattered. The Blitzkrieg was dead, stopped cold in a snowy Belgian forest. The German survivors, their minds reeling from the shock of the invisible cannons, abandoned their burning, wrecked vehicles and fled into the woods on foot, choosing to face the freezing cold rather than the fire magic of the American ghosts. When American infantry later advanced up the road, they found a scene of absolute apocalyptic carnage. The burning, twisted hulks of a dozen elite German Panzers littered the road, a steel graveyard that marked the high tide of the German offensive. In that sector, but they found no big American anti-tank gun positions. They found no line of defensive Sherman tanks. All they found were the faint, churned tracks in the snow leading back into the forest, the tracks of the artillery pieces that had refused to be victims, the tracks of the ghosts of St. Vith. The Germans had been shocked not just by the firepower, but by the sheer, brilliant, rule-breaking audacity of the American tactic. They had expected a fair fight, a predictable battle between tanks and guns. What they got was a terrifying lesson in American ingenuity. If the rules say your weapon can't win, you change the rules.